Imagine looking up at the sky and seeing a creature as big as a giraffe, flying. This isn't a fantasy scene, but a glimpse into the late Cretaceous. Its name was Quetzalcoatlus, in honor of the feathered serpent god of Mesoamerican mythology. It was, without a doubt, the largest winged creature ever to soar through the skies of North America, and perhaps the entire planet. But how could something so colossal even take to the skies? What secrets did its body conceal to defy gravity itself? Today we journey back millions of years to a radically different world where monsters ruled the air, land, and sea. Get ready to dive into the story of a forgotten giant, one that wasn't a dinosaur, but may have been more awe-inspiring than many of them. This isn't just the story of a fossil, it's the legend of the last titan of the skies. Approximately ago, 70 million years, during the late Cretaceous, planet Earth was a wild and fascinating place, but also unpredictable and deadly. The continental masses were not like those we know today. North America was divided by a vast inland sea, the Niobrara Sea, a waterway that crossed the continent from north to south, from what is now the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean. On both sides, lush plains, dense swamps, and tropical forests covered the mainland. The weather was warmer than current, without ice caps at the poles. There was no frozen Arctic. In their place reigned coniferous forests, giant ferns and palm trees. The seasons were mild, and the oxygen levels a little higher, which favored giant animals like Quetzalcoatlus itself. This environment was a paradise for colossal creatures. Pterosaurs of different sizes flew in the skies, some with wings as wide as a small airplane. On land, dinosaurs dominated with indisputable sovereignty. Tyrannosaurus rex walked west, while hadrosaurs like Edmontosaurus grazed in large herds. In the coastal waters, sea monsters such as the mosasaurus, predators as imposing as any nightmare creature. But Quetzalcoatlus was not a mere inhabitant of this world. He was a king without a crown. He lived above all in what are today Great Plains of Texas, in areas that bordered rivers, lagoons, and open plains. Although its bones were light and hollow, similar to those of modern birds, its body was gigantic. It measured about 10 to 11 meters wingspan, the equivalent of a Cessna plane. And yet, he was not clumsy. He was perfectly adapted to fly, glide, hunt, and dominate the sky, and possibly the land as well. Paleontologists believe that its wingspan allowed it to travel immense distances by gliding, taking advantage of the thermal currents of the warm Cretaceous climate. It has been theorized that it could take off using a kind of front leg hopping, a technique completely different from that of modern birds. The ground, firm but full of low vegetation, would be the perfect setting for this explosive takeoff. Once in the air, it could rise hundreds of meters and travel kilometers without barely moving its wings. But what did such a creature hunt in a world full of titans? Unlike what many imagine, Quetzalcoatlus did not live only on the oceans, nor did it eat fish. Today we know that, due to its anatomy, it is more likely that it was an opportunistic terrestrial predator, which roamed the plains like a huge infernal stork, catching small vertebrates, baby dinosaurs, carrion, and even some stranded fish. Its long neck, powerful toothless beak, and great mobility gave it access to a varied diet, adapted to the changing Cretaceous environment. This behavior would have been possible thanks to an ecologically diverse environment. Where today we see deserts or agricultural fields, there once existed mighty rivers, wetlands rich in life, and skies crossed by swarms of giant insects and other winged creatures. Vegetation abounds, and with it prey. In this world without humans, sin-dominant mammals, and without ice, life was bustling in every corner. It was a perfect ecosystem, for they will evolve beasts as colossal as the Quetzalcoatlus. But even in this reptilian paradise, the competition was brutal. To survive, it was not enough to be big, had to be efficient, adapted, and resistant. That was the scene. A still young planet, pulsating with ancient life, where the laws of physics seemed twisted by evolution. And in the middle of this dance of giants, a winged being dominated the skies with the elegance of a prehistoric ghost. And it is in this context where not only the anatomy of Quetzalcoatlus emerges, but also its legend. Because what this being represents was not only its size, but the extreme limit of what is possible in the animal kingdom. The Late Cretaceous was a period of titans, where every corner of the earth vibrated with the life of gigantic creatures. But to truly understand Quetzalcoatlus, it's not enough to look at its fossilized bones. We must observe its neighbors, competitors, and possible prey, because his story was not written in the sky, but also in the daily struggle to survive in a fierce world. Around him, the world was a living tapestry of extraordinary species. In the air, others, pterosaurios. They shared the skies, although many were smaller, such as Pteranodon, with its elegant crest and fine wings. Others were close in size, such as Hatzegopteryx in Europe. But Quetzalcoatlus had something that made him unique. Lived further inland, far from the sea, in dry or riverine environments where few pterosaurs ventured. On the Earth's surface, the panorama was just as impressive. Herbivores dominated in number and variety. Alamosaurus, one of the last giant sauropods in North America, roamed the continent's southern plains with its long neck and heavy steps. This colossus could reach 30 meters long and weigh more than 30 tons. Although it was not the direct prey of Quetzalcoatlus, its offspring would have been vulnerable to such an agile and opportunistic predator. Beyond these giants, there were other more common but equally fascinating inhabitants. The hadrosaurios, also known as duck-billed dinosaurs like the Griposaurus, they moved in large herds along the banks and swamps, using their complex vocalization systems to communicate with each other. Their scaly skin, toothed beaks, and social behavior made them similar in some ways to large modern herbivores, such as elephants or zebras. But every ecosystem has its shadows, and in this world, the most feared predator was the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Although their range does not completely overlap with that of Quetzalcoatlus, some scientists believe they may have interbred in certain southern regions. The T-Rex was the embodiment of terror, with a bite stronger than that of any known land animal. If a Quetzalcoatlus descended to land to hunt or rest, it had to be careful. Even a titan of air was vulnerable to the largest of carnivores. However, the Quetzalcoatlus was not a simple giant bird. Its body, with a long S-shaped neck, an immense toothless beak, and long legs, made it look like a mix between a demonic crane and an otherworldly creature. Although its body was large, its skeleton was lightweight, with hollow but surprisingly strong bones designed to maximize flight efficiency. One of his most intriguing features was his way of walking. Unlike modern birds, pterosaurs walked on, all fours using their wings folded as front support. This gave it a strange but firm gait, allowing it to move over land with enough speed to ambush unsuspecting prey. It moved like a mutant heron, but the size of a giraffe, and he did not hunt like a hawk or a lion. His technique was probably more subtle, more patient. Like a prehistoric stork, it would have moved along riverbanks and plains, pecking at small creatures eating carrion or stalking neglected nests. His long neck and keen eyesight were precise tools in a body designed for stalking, not chasing. Additionally, some paleontologists believe that Quetzalcoatlus was an animal solitary or semi-social. That is, it could live alone, but also form small groups when conditions required it, such as during migration or reproduction times. Perhaps they gathered in nesting areas in the warm seasons, as some seabirds do today. Among all the inhabitants of the Cretaceous, Quetzalcoatlus was an anomaly. It didn't quite fit in with the flyers nor with the terrestrials. He was a liminal creature, living between two worlds. His presence evoked the same mystery as his name, taken from a deity, Quetzalcoatl, the Mesoamerican god of the sky, wind, and life. But he was not alone. Although he dominated, he also had to adapt, compete, and resist, because even the greatest must fight for their place under the sun. When we think of a flying creature as immense as the Quetzalcoatlus, the first thing that comes to mind is, how the hell did something like that fly? It's a logical question. After all, we are talking about an animal up to 250 kilos of weight, with a wingspan greater than many light aircraft. And yet, it flew, and it flew well. The key to his success was in his perfectly optimized biomechanics. Everything about his body screamed efficiency, starting with their bones, hollow, extremely thin but internally reinforced with structures that made them strong without sacrificing lightness. This architecture allowed it to be surprisingly light for its size. Its thorax was robust, with a well-developed keel where powerful pectoral muscles were anchored, similar in structure to those of modern birds. But his greatest trick was his way of takeoff, which still baffles and fascinates scientists today. Unlike birds, which use their hind legs to propel themselves, pterosaurs such as Quetzalcoatlus, they did it with a quadruple impulse, an explosive jump with its powerful forelimbs, his wings. This catapult-type takeoff allowed it to take flight almost instantly, without the need for a long run or strong tailwinds. Once in the air, he was a master of gliding. It used ascending thermal currents, similar to those used by today's vultures, to rise effortlessly for hours. It is estimated that it could travel hundreds or even thousands of kilometers, gliding over open plains in search of food or new territories. Its flight was more similar to that of an albatross than that of an eagle. It did not depend so much on flapping its wings as on strategy, but it wasn't all air. On land, it was also lethal. Although its wings were long, they were perfectly designed to fold when not flying, giving it great terrestrial mobility. He walked on four legs with a strange but efficient gait. Its long hind legs and arms turned into wings served as support, as if it walked with long crutches. This quadrupedal posture allowed him stalk prey from dry land, sneak up, and then attack with surgical precision. As for food, its adaptability was its greatest weapon. Its long toothless beak was not made for tearing apart large prey, but for catch small animals quickly, such as lizards, amphibians, baby dinosaurs, or even invertebrates. It could also scavenge, taking advantage of corpses abandoned by other predators. In such a cutthroat ecosystem, seizing every opportunity was a matter of life and death. It may also have used its neck as a kind of whip, throwing it forward to capture its prey with surprising speed and strength. This technique, added to his keen vision and great mobility, made him a very effective hunter. Another key strategy, your ability to detect thermal changes and wind patterns. Pterosaurs had developed brain lobes in areas related to balance and orientation, allowing them to plan with great precision. In addition, some studies suggest that they had a very sensitive sense of hearing, useful for detecting high-pitched sounds and movements of air. Vital skills for both flight and hunting. And let's not forget the camouflage. Although we do not have remains of skin or feathers of Quetzalcoatlus, traces of fluff-like filaments have been found, called pycnofibers, in other pterosaurs. These structures could have served to regulate body temperature, but also to blend in with the environment, especially when stalking from the ground. Imagine him camouflaged among the bushes, motionless like a statue, until his neck shoots out in a lightning movement. Regarding reproduction, it is likely that, like many modern birds, it nested in elevated or difficult-to-access areas, protecting its eggs from terrestrial predators. Some theories suggest that it laid many small eggs, relying on quantity rather than parental care, although other experts argue that certain species of pterosaurs could have cared for their young during the first weeks of life. And there's even more, the crest on his head. Although it had no offensive function, it could have served to attract a partner, as a kind of visual advertisement between males and females. Each individual could have variations in the shape or size of the crest, functioning as a sign of health, age or dominance, similar to the bright plumage in birds such as the peacock. In short, Quetzalcoatlus was not a simple big flyer. It was a survivor refined by millions of years of evolution, a creature that defied the laws of gravity and logic. Its combination of aerial, terrestrial, and sensory techniques made it more than an impressive animal. They turned it into a living adaptation machine, a true master of the balance between strength, lightness, and strategy. Nothing on Earth stays the same for long. And in the time of Quetzalcoatlus, the world was changing in ways that would test every species that inhabited it. North America, their home, was not the same territory we know today. At that time, was divided into two large landmasses by a huge inland sea, the Niobrara Sea or Western Seaway. The shallow ocean that stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic, splitting the continent in two. This sea created humid and warm climates on its coasts, while the lands to the west, where it lived Quetzalcoatlus, were drier and more open. It was a paradise for giant pterosaurs, with vast plains where they could walk in search of food and air currents that allowed them to glide great distances effortlessly. But this balance would not last forever. Towards the end of the Cretaceous, the tectonic plates were in constant motion. The Niobrara Sea began to retreat, exposing large areas of swampy terrain and sediment. This drastically changed the climate, causing periods of drought, changes in vegetation, and the disappearance of many aquatic species that had been key in the food chain. For an animal as specialized as Quetzalcoatlus, this meant a forced adjustment in their hunting and travel habits. Another crucial factor was the increased competition. In an ecosystem where food is scarce, the fight for survival intensifies. And Quetzalcoatlus, he was no longer the only great hunter. The Tyrannosaurus rex was at its peak, dominating the western lands with its insatiable hunger and powerful bite. Although it did not hunt giant pterosaurs as its main prey, any Quetzalcoatlus venturing too long on the ground became an easy target for this super predator. Furthermore, the dinosaur's scavengers, like Dakotaraptor, they could steal the corpses, on which it fed Quetzalcoatlus. The pressure from these predators forced it to adapt. Perhaps it had to travel even longer distances to find food or search for prey in more complicated environments. But it wasn't just the weather and predators that were a threat. Volcanic activity in certain regions was altering the composition of the atmosphere. The eruptions released large amounts of carbon dioxide and suspended particles, affecting the global climate. These changes could have caused unexpected cold periods or acid rain, affecting vegetation and food chains. Despite these difficulties, Quetzalcoatlus persists. Its ability to fly long distances allowed it to find new food sources and escape hostile regions. But his reign was coming to an end. Something even bigger and more devastating was looming on the horizon. The story of Quetzalcoatlus. It was a successful one. For millions of years, it dominated the skies over North America, taking advantage of its perfect design to soar through the air, travel great distances, and hunt with precision. But no species escapes the whims of fate. The end of the Cretaceous was a time of instability. The climate had changed, the seas had receded, and competition for food was fierce. However, none of these threats compared to the cataclysm that was to come. Million eyes. Years ago, an object the size of a mountain fell from the sky and hit the earth with unimaginable force. The impact occurred in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico, leaving a crater of 180 kilometers in diameter, the Chicxulub crater. The impact released energy equivalent to 10 billion atomic bombs, generating scorching heat that set entire forests ablaze in an instant. The skies were filled with fire. Shockwaves swept across the planet, and in the mega tsunami more than 100 meters high, devastated the coasts. For a Quetzalcoatlus who lived near these areas, there was no escape. But the real tragedy was not only the immediate destruction, but what came next. The collision sent billions of tons of dust and sulfur into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight for months or even years. Temperatures plummeted, and plants, deprived of light, died en masse. Without vegetation, herbivores disappeared. And without prey, predators soon followed the same fate. To Quetzalcoatlus, this new world was a death sentence. Extreme cold affects their ability to fly and find food. Their usual prey, such as small dinosaurs, amphibians, and reptiles, had disappeared or were in decline. Even their ability to scavenge was limited, as corpses did not last long enough in a world where decay was slowed by low temperatures. Lack of food and unstable weather were a lethal combination. Although some individuals may have survived for a time by taking refuge in less affected regions, the ecosystem on which they depended had collapsed. And so, slowly, one of the most impressive creatures to ever fly on Earth disappeared forever. Quetzalcoatlus. He was not the only victim. Until the 75% of the planet's species became extinct in this event, including non-avian dinosaurs, large marine reptiles, and most pterosaurs. Only small mammals, birds, and certain reptiles managed to survive the catastrophe, inheriting a devastated world but full of new opportunities. The colossus of the heavens had fallen. But his legacy, written in fossils and in our fascination with the impossible, will endure forever. The story of Quetzalcoatlus. It's a reminder of how fleeting life can be, even for the titans who once ruled the world. He was a creature that seemed invincible, the greatest flyer who ever lived, a cunning predator and a master of the air. But not even his greatness could save him from the abrupt change that transformed the Earth into a cemetery of giants. Today, millions of years later, we live in a world facing its own crisis. The mass extinction that ended Quetzalcoatlus was caused by an asteroid, but the mass extinction we are witnessing now, it is caused by us. Habitat destruction, climate change, and overexploitation are pushing thousands of species to the brink. Quetzalcoatlus. It leaves us with a disturbing question. We will learn of the past before it's too late.